Alright, Matt from Sleeve Notes here, and it's time for a review of the highly anticipated 10th studio album from thrash metal, heavy metal, hard rock outfit, Metallica, Hardwired to SelfDestruct. Metallica, since their debut in 1983, have been dominating the metal and alternative music scene. First with the underground with their first couple of records, and then when they started to hit the mainstream in 1986, and they really started to get up to a peak after 1991 with their self-titled album, the highest selling album since that year, when they went on to have 5 consecutive #1 albums on the Billboard Hot 100. However, they haven't released anything since 2008. That's their longest gap in between album releases. And okay, so they've collaborated with Lou Reed, and they made a film, and they've done their festivals, but really that's a long time to wait for new music from the band, proper new music, and we finally have it this year. Was the wait worth it? Now, the band have led up to this release with a very, very long teaser campaign starting a few months back with the release of the lead single, first track, and title track, Hardwired, and it was a breath of fresh air, really. They've experimented a lot since they've moved on from that traditional thrash style, so a lot of people would have been happy to see them return to this point in their career. It went sort of back there with Death Magnetic, but this song is only 3 minutes long. It's the shortest song since Motor Breath, I believe, back on Kill 'Em All, and it's definitely a return to their roots, and they've not messed about. They've just put it out. It was supposedly the last song they recorded for the album. They've gone out there, and the lyrics are a bit so-so, but it's an interesting riff. The solo's a bit short, but there's nothing wrong with it, and it's just an exciting, energetic track that I think people really wanted and needed from the band at this point. It's a great way to start the record as well. If you go back to the sort of classic releases, right, the Lightning, Master Puppets, and Justice for All, they all had this kind of similar format where the opening song would be a fast sort of pure thrash track. Look at Fight Fire with Fire, Battery, Blackened. They all have it, and this didn't have that sort of clean sort of intro like on Fight Fire with Fire or on Battery, but it's very much a sort of reminder of that time, and they kind of stick to that formula a lot on this album. If you look at the second track, Atlas Rise, which was the third single released on Halloween, if you go back to those other albums, you look at Ride the Lightning and then Master Puppets and Injustice for All, they're all the title tracks, and okay, this isn't the title track, but all of them are more progressive, different experimental, sort of different sections. It's more progressive work always on the second track, and I think they've gone back to that again with Atlas Rise. If you hear it, there's a riff that's a lot like how they made that name for Iron Maiden, for example, which I think is where they get a lot of those progressive elements from, because they were clearly one of their biggest influences. And you hear it on Moth into Flame as well, which was the second single. These two tracks borrow a lot from influences like that in the new wave of British heavy metal, and you also get that a bit with sort of a Black Sabbath influence on the third track, Now That We're Dead, and the fifth track, Dream No More. You get that kind of doom metal vibe, and actually on Now That We're Dead, it continues that classic format. It's a slower song, it's a chugging and heavy song like For Whom the Bell Tolls or The Thing That Should Not Be, and they've gone back to having that as a third track, which I think a lot of people just feel a bit comfortable hearing those kind of same sort of conventions coming back into the music on this new album. And if you look at Dream No More, which is obviously very similar, like I said, to Now That We're Dead, in that kind of tempo-wise and general sort of creepy, eerie vibe to it, kind of spooky. You get that again, it comes up again with that chuggy sound. It's very much like The Thing That Should Not Be, with a bit of a load and reload vibe to it. You hear the vocal effects on James's voice and that really do remind me of that, like kind of like Devil's Dance. And also we get a bit of Black Album influence in there as well, Sad But True. if you get towards the end of Dream No More, you hear James, the music kind of comes to a stop, and James breathes in, and then it continues just like that bit in Sad But True, where it stops and it comes back in. And it's quite good even this early on in the album to hear that classic Metallica feel with that more sort of experimental 90s approach to it. The one thing I would have to say is a slight problem, because the first disc really is very good, but there is a slight problem, that is there's no fourth track ballad. The fourth track on here is Moth Into Flame, which is in no means a ballad. It's one of the fastest, heaviest, thrashiest songs on the album. But we get something similar at the sixth track, the closing track on disc 1, Halo on Fire. And Halo on Fire isn't strictly a ballad, but it has that kind of feel to it. And again, if you look at songs like Fade to Black, Welcome Home Sanitarium, and One, they go from kind of a melancholic, sad sort of beginning part to a really fast sort of crescendo at the end. It gets a bit heavier, it gets a bit thrashier, and you get that with Halo on Fire. You get James coming out with the line, "Hello darkness, say goodbye," which is kind of similar to his words at the end of Fade to Black, and it delivers them in the same sort of way. And I think maybe this would have been track 4 if it had been a standard 8 or 9 or 10 album release, like they did if you look at The Day It Never Comes on Death Magnetic. But I think being 2 discs, they wanted to say this for the last track of the first disc, and I think that was a good idea because it really does close out part 1 really well. His vocals on this album are really, really good. Like they are on a lot of the album. His voice is at the best it's been probably since 1999 with the S&M. And if you've seen him live in the last couple of years, like I have, then you won't be been surprised by his vocals being this strong, because they clearly are getting to a peak again. Now the second disc we were told was going to be more experimental, and whilst I'm not sure that's entirely true, you do get a feel of that. You hear some more sort of sludgier riffs and sort of a lot more distorted sections, and already I think even on the first song on the second disc, Confusion, you already hear sort of a bit of a departure. There's that intro is quite kind of like Am I Evil by Diamond Head, but it's not, the song doesn't go that way. It kind of goes a bit softer at the start, before a very, very Death Magnetic chorus. It's very influenced by that album, I think. Going back to the war metaphors, which James has talked about a lot in the past. Yeah, it's an interesting way to start an album. I'm not sure how good it actually is as an opener, really. I've only listened to it as one consecutive album. I've not listened to it on the 2 separate discs yet. So maybe it's better than I think. But it doesn't really seem like a very traditional Metallica style opening song. Even on Load and Reload, if you had Fuel and Ain't My Bitch, they were both very kind of faster. Not honestly heavy, because Ain't My Bitch isn't that heavy, but they're both faster, kind of some of the heaviest songs on the albums, I suppose. Confusion isn't like that at all, and it's not fast like any of the other openers. It's very different, and it's probably one of my least favourite on the album, but it does have its merits, I think. Again, the vocals are pretty smooth on it. I quite like the war metaphor. With his life, it's the war that never ends. It's quite a nice sentiment, and there are definite parts of the song that I listen to and think, you know what, that's quite good, and I quite like the tempo, even though it's very mid-paced, but still, I think my biggest complaint really about the song is it's not what I expected. I expected a very sludgy, distorted, almost Saint Anger type song, and we don't actually get that on this song, although we do on Am I Savage, for example, one of the later songs. It's the 4th song on the second disc, and on there you get, it kind of descends at the end into this very sludgy, sort of very, very much Saint Anger type sort of ending, and that's kind of what I would have liked to see on Confusion, although I should probably be happy it's there at all, because I always like the idea of Metallica doing something like that, and they have. a few of these moments I liked the idea of Metallica going very full on traditional and classic, and they have done on Atlas and Moth, and I like the idea of them taking a kind of grungier approach, which again you hear on going back to the first disc. You hear Dream No More is very, very Alice in Chains inspired, but then again they were also very Black Sabbath inspired in themselves, so there are a lot of similarities anyway between the two bands. Unfortunately, after Confusion we get which is my second least favourite, we then get my least favourite song, which is by no means a bad song. I don't dislike it, but it does create kind of a slow start to the album. They're nowhere near the level of the first disc songs. ManUnkind is the second song, and I always laugh at the title. I think it's kind of a bit of a strange title. It's not got the cool effect that I think James was going for. I like the fact that they capitalised the UN in it, kind of like, oh, look what we've done, aren't we so funny? It's like, well, you're not really that funny, but I guess James thought it's hilarious or something. I don't know. This song is again, it's not a bad one. I like the grooviness of it. It's something taken straight out of the load and reload playbook. And the start is kind of, I'm undecided with the start. It's very soft, which they do again on Murder One, but I think on Murder One later in the album, the fifth song, the penultimate track, I think they do it better on there. This one kind of just comes across a bit poppy, kind of like they're taking a Hero of the Day approach, and then it goes into more of a 2x4 kind of vibe, and I don't know, I'm undecided. I do like it, but I think the lyrics have a lot to be desired, and it just doesn't stand out to me like the other songs, and neither does Confusion. So at this point I'm thinking, well, is this disc going to be a lot worse than the first one, or is it going to be just a little bit worse? And I was actually very pleasantly surprised by the rest of this, because I think it goes uphill very, very fast from this point onwards. The third track on the second disc, Here Comes Revenge, has one of the best riffs I have heard Metallica produce in a long time. My favourite on the album by far. And it's just, yeah, it's really, really, it's got that bluesy grooviness to it, but it's very heavy as well, and the intro to Here Comes Revenge is quite long, which is kind of a problem, because a lot of the intros on the album are quite long, but this one really works. It's very heavy, it's very, it's very crushing, and like I say, the riff, they sort of explodes into this riff, which sounds fantastic, I think. And the whole song is very eerie, it's very creepy, which is kind of heightened by the video, if you watch the video. As you know, Metallica released videos for every single song. I don't know if you probably knew that. And a lot of the videos are very sort of visually impressive. Something like Dream No More has a really cool effect on it. Halo Fire has the black and white sort of light sort of colouring to it, which looks very cool. And on Spit Out the Bone you get a kind of animation and live action sort of fusion, but the Here Comes Revenge video is full on animated, as is the Murder One video, and these are probably the best videos. They really actually bring out the best in the songs. I wasn't expecting videos like this when I saw the first three, because they're just basically the band played in the studio, but Here Comes Revenge it's got a storyline to the video. It's got different characters. It's got like this wolf, or apparently it's a hyena. I wouldn't really know, to be honest. And I'm not sure exactly what's going on, but it's very stylistic. It's probably very influenced by Kirk and his horror film sort of obsession, which, if you know anything about him, then you probably will know that he is quite obsessed with horror films. And yeah, the video kind of, it just complements the music really well. Like the style of the music and the style of the video go together perfectly. And I like the animation side of it. They did it with All Nightmare Long on the last record, and again they've done it on this one twice. The other one being Murder One. And these two songs I think are going to be very underrated. A lot of people are already putting them as sort of the bottom two, but for me they're actually quite near the top. I love both of them. Here Comes Revenge, like I say, the riff is fantastic. I think the lyrics are pretty cool. He's got Bible references in there, which always work out well. Things like The God That Failed and Like a Messiah are two of my favourite Metallica songs. The Judas Kiss as well from Death Magnetic, and yeah, it's just kind of a very groove metal inspired as well. I think a bit of Pantera influence, and yeah, it's a really good song. And Murder One is the same. I don't know where the criticism for this comes from. A lot of people saying it's phoned in and it's stock. I don't see that. If it's stock, then well they have a good start, don't they? Because it's yeah, I like it. It's very kind of it's very mid-tempo, as is pretty much the entire record, aside from a few songs. Which, I mean, the song is a Motorhead tribute, and some people are saying that it wasn't good to go mid-tempo for a Motorhead tribute. Obviously, very fast and dirty and carefree band, but you know, anyone can impersonate Motorhead. Metallica have written a song in their style. If you listen to the intro, you've got that kind of Fade to Black like intro. So clearly they wanted to make it a bit more heartfelt, a bit more emotional, and full credit to them, because it's a really quite a moving song, especially if you watch the video, which, like I say, it's animated and it follows Lemmy around, and it's not a particularly sad video. You know, it's focused on its girls and its alcohol and its drugs and all, and its cars and all that, but the whole thing kind of came together and kind of moved me a little bit, because it feels just like, I don't know what it is about it, I can't put my finger on it, but it just seems like a great tribute to a great musician, an icon. And he was a friend as well, he was a friend in the band, so it's, you know, obviously it meant a lot to them, and I think it does come out, you can hear the emotion coming out. In terms of where it is on the record as well, I think it's a great penultimate track. If you go back to Lives to Die, and you hear, which is on And Justice for All, it's the penultimate track, and that's kind of the Cliff tribute on that album. So it's nice to have it on the penultimate spot again. And the whole song with the chorus, I like the fact they've actually got two choruses. They kind of changed the words up a bit, but it's kind of very powerful chorus, and it kind of has that kind of crescendo type feel, like the album is coming to a climax, which is really important, I think, for a penultimate track, because it needs to lead you into this massive closer, which is a really important part of an album for me. And a massive closer, by the way, is exactly what they have on Spit Out the Bone. If you the song just blew me away, you know, as a lot of people. It's the heaviest song since Dyer's Eve, which is actually my favourite Metallica song, which I think is partly why I love this one so much, because there's so many similarities. The drums on Dyer's Eve, I would have previously said, well, I would still say is Lars' best performance. It feels like he's channeling that again on Spit Out the Bone. You know, those drums, they sound like a machine gun, like really they do. And there's some really you know, I'm not sure how complex it is. I'm not a drummer. I'm not sure how complex it is, or whether it's more just fast. But yeah, I think it's going to be difficult to play live, because it's really impressive. Especially for someone who everyone knows is not the best drummer in the world, but he really pulls out everything on this last song. And it's not like it doesn't sound like he's trying to impress anyone. It you know, it just sounds like he's just building those drums into the song. The two, you couldn't have one without the other. You know, the song needed impressive drumming, and you know, clearly he needed a great song to show off his drumming on. So, you know, it works for everybody. And the whole song it's a masterpiece. It's my favourite on the album. It's one of my favourites they've ever done. I think it's already in my top 20 or so songs. It's kind of like a continuation of All Nightmare Long, which is my favourite on Death Magnetic. The song, it just blew me away. I don't think anyone was expecting a song like this from Metallica at this point in their careers. You know, the vocals, again, they peak on this song, especially when he says the line "Spit out the bone." James, you can just hear he's having a great time. He's feeling the song, and it's a pretty cool title. Let's be honest. Spit out the bone. It really does the line justice. Some lines, some combinations of sentences just work really well together, and that is one of them. You know, I can't fault the song really. You know, there's a really great bridge in there where he starts talking about dedicating to him. There's 2 solos, actually the best solos on the album, I think. There's a lot of guitar harmonisation. There's a fantastic bass riff in there. Metallica often come under fire for sort of not respecting the bass in their songs, but you know, it's a great little bass riff that you hear in there. And I think the song is fantastic. You know, you can't have a problem with the pacing of it. You know, it's not overly fast for the sake of it, but it's just the right speed, and then you get slower bits. The amount of sections in this song is really impressive. And there's some great, not just the bass riffs, but some great little guitar riffs in there as well. It's like Riff City, this song. You know, there's quite a lot of different sort of guitar parts in there, and it all comes together so well. Harmonisation has been great throughout the whole album, I think, but on this song especially, they really click. And that's something that I've missed from James and Kirk. You know, it's like they've always had that kind of relationship, that kind of clicking together, and it comes back in full force on this record, and this song in particular. It's a fantastic closer. Again, going back to that traditional format, you had Dyer's Eve, you had Damage Inc., you had Creeping Death, which, okay, it wasn't the last song, although I think everyone agrees that it should have been swapped around with the Call of Cthulhu. Even something like My Apocalypse on Death Magnetic, you know. As much as I love songs like Fixer and The Outlaw Torn and All Within My Hands, I much prefer the fast thrash closer, because it's just so satisfying. It feels like a nice rounded end to the record, but it almost also leaves you wanting a bit more as well, which is exactly what you want from a closer. All I have left to talk about really is the bonus disc, which I'm not going to spend too much time on because none of the songs on here are exactly new. But they've redone Lords of Summer, which was a song which I kind of liked parts of, but not altogether. I think they've improved it a lot. They've changed some of the lyrics around. It sounds a lot nicer. The master on the album as a whole is actually pretty good. Production is something they've not had. They used to be great at in the 90s, and they kind of let slip in the 2000s, so it's great to see it back up there again. It's really good again. And, you know, none of the instruments are particularly too quiet or too loud. The album is a loud album, but not overly. I think it's to a good point that it kind of enhances the music rather than sabotages it. It's the album. You know, I don't think any of the songs on this bonus disc particularly needed to go on there, although you could make a case for Lords of Summer, because I do think it's better than Confusion or ManUnkind. I never liked the version before that much. I thought it was okay, but this is a much better version. I think the lyric tweaks are welcome as well. And then you get 3 covers, which we've all heard before, but now they've come to proper sort of studio mastering. The Ronnie Rising medley is fantastic. Like Murder One is a great tribute to Lemmy. I'm sure Ronnie James Dio would be very, very happy with this tribute. You know, it was good before, but it's nice to hear it in a proper album context. My favourite cover on Garage Inc. was Always Merciful Fate, which is obviously a medley. I like the medleys because it's kind of the closest they can get to writing an original song while it's still being covers, because obviously they have to work them in together. It you know, it works great. And Remember Tomorrow, the Iron Maiden cover is pretty good as well. It's not nothing really to write home about, but yeah, it's decent. But when a Blind Man Cries is a truly beautiful cover. I have to say they do a great version of that. Probably my favourite of the 3 covers on there, and I think that's good that none of these sound like throwaways. They all actually are on a similar level to the actual album proper. And then you get a load of live songs as well, which you know, they're perfectly good performances. I think they're from the Record Store Day performance actually. As a whole, the record it's a bit of a return to form, and I don't say that like because I dislike any of the albums, because I actually don't dislike anything that they've made, even apart from Lulu, although even that had elements of good musical and sort of instrumentation. But it's definitely a return to form. You know, it's no denying that their best albums are their first 4, and this is about as close to that point as you can realistically expect them to get. You know, they're getting old. They've obviously had a history of playing really fast, physically demanding music, a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol, takes its toll on it, and everyone is sounding great. You know, Rob's always been a great bass player, and I think this finally starts to get to shine a bit. Lars is pulling out all the stops. Kirk is probably the most disappointing member on here, but even so, you know, the riffs, I think there's some great riffs on it. I think there's some really interesting solos on it. I can't really complain. And obviously James, you know, he's never really fallen away. His vocals are back to his best, but he's still a fantastic rhythm guitarist. He plays fast. He plays great rhythmic guitar. He's fantastic. He always has been. And his lyrics are kind of sometimes are a bit miss, but it's more hit than miss, realistically. What I do like as well is they incorporate all their previous styles. That kind of, you hear the sort of kill 'em all pure thrash in a lot of places, but that Ride the Lightning through to And Justice for All, that kind of progressive thrash takes a lot of precedent. But then a lot of it also has a very bluesier feel, like Load Reload Black Album, and the whole thing kind of is done. They can take all that and do it in a death magnetic way. Even Saint Anger, you hear a lot of Saint Anger undertones in here, especially something like Am I Savage. I think it sounds very much like a Saint Anger song. It could easily be. And the chorus for Confusion as well, I think could be. If I had to criticise the album, I'd say Lars does rely on his snare drum too much. I know I've praised his performance, but it does get a bit repetitive, as do Kirk's solos. You know, they're a little bit generic, a little bit uninspired. They're not awful, they mostly do the job, but, you know, they could be a bit more experimental. And I think that's the main problem the album has is it could be more experimental, more variety of instruments, trumpets, more different strings, sort of orchestral parts. You know, taking a bit more of a leap. They've never really done that properly. They only did S&M, but on their record they've never properly done that. You know, there's no, you know, you could get some kind of more interesting percussion in there. You know, it could take a few more risks, and it, you know, where it's meant to be experimental on the second disc, it could be more experimental than it is, because it's not really that experimental. Let's be honest. And if I really had to push, I'd say that some of the songs are a bit overlong. The intros are all very long. Sometimes they're good, like on Murder 1 and Here Comes Revenge, but other times they're a little bit too long. Like on, I really like Dream No More, but the intro to that does go on a little bit too long, and I think they could cut some of that down. And if they did that a lot, you know, it could become a lot more streamlined. It could fit onto one disc. I think it can anyway. 2 discs is maybe it's a quality thing, we don't know, but it could be pushed down to one disc to save people some money and to just sort of trim a bit of that fat off. I think Hardwired is a great example of what they could be looking to do more of if they release any more music. Shorter, snappier, getting to the point a bit faster. But then again, they've always had this problem, so which is partly why Hardwired is still a breath of fresh air. I think you need to give the album a chance though, you know. A lot of the songs do grow on you. Here Comes Revenge grew on me a lot. Like I say, it's one of my favourites on the album now. The only song that really hasn't grown on me is Hardwired, although I don't think any less of it. I just, you know, which shows another side to it. Or maybe it's good that they have made a song that gets more to the point, but at the same time, it doesn't have anywhere to go. The other songs all have different bits to get into and explore, and it leaves growing room for you as a listener, I think. I think the album does definitely have its moments where it challenges the listener, which is it's always nice. So overall, I'm very happy with the album, having waited since Death Magnetic to get my hands on this. It's definitely a welcome level, definitely. It's more than acceptable. I'm really enjoying it. I enjoy it more and more in each listen. You hear bits and you start to appreciate it more. And I think it's great to see the band clearly enjoying themselves and just writing what they want to write, you know. They're not afraid of going back to that 90s style, which is often unfairly criticised, and they're not afraid of going back to their roots. You know, they're mixing it up and they're going for, I think, whatever they fancy to do, to be honest. Clearly with the videos, they've put a lot of freedom on themselves, you know. They're not restricting themselves at all, and I think that's great. Overall, I think I'm going to give the album, the first disc is massively stronger than the second disc, you know. The first disc on its own is enough to get a high rating. I don't want to say the second disc dragged it down too much, because the first disc isn't any worse because the second disc, and that still qualifies it for a high rating. But the sort of the drop in quality on the second disc kind of pulls that rating down a bit. And I think also the fact that it's not anything particularly new and not anything particularly risky, I think that takes its toll, and it's on the album as well. So all that considered, I'm going to give a strong 8 to the album, and I will see you next time.